Welcome to An Introduction to Substantial Improvements and Substantial Damage, a training course for New Hampshire community officials. In this course, you will learn about substantial improvement and substantial damage provisions in your community's floodplain ordinance, responsibilities of the community, and best practices related to these provisions, and where you can get help or more information if you need it. Let's get started. Substantial improvement and substantial damage requirements apply in communities that participate in the National Flood Insurance Program, or NFIP. The NFIP is a federal emergency management agency program that communities across the country can choose to participate in. In New Hampshire, over 90% of communities participate. NFIP communities must adopt and enforce a floodplain ordinance in order to manage development in areas that have a high risk of flooding, as shown on flood maps produced by FEMA. Enforcing the floodplain ordinance ensures that when development does occur in areas with a high risk of flooding, it happens in a way that keeps future flood damage to a minimum and keeps people safe. The availability of flood insurance is also a key part of the NFIP. In participating communities, NFIP flood insurance policies are available for purchase by any homeowner, renter, or business owner, including those with property that is outside of a high-risk floodplain shown on the flood maps. Flood insurance is recommended even outside of high-risk areas because floods can and do happen beyond those areas. The floodplain ordinance that NFIP communities adopt and enforce must meet minimum NFIP standards. Those minimum standards include the substantial improvement and substantial damage provisions, which we'll discuss next. Your community's floodplain ordinance defines the terms substantial improvement and substantial damage. If proposed development is in the special flood hazard area on the maps and meets the criteria of either of the definitions, that means that the same building requirements that apply for new construction, as stated in the ordinance, must be met. The substantial improvement and substantial damage provisions serve a very important purpose. They are the best opportunity for older buildings to be brought up to the same modern flood damage resistant building standards that apply for new buildings constructed in the special flood hazard area. When that happens, the cost to rebuild after future flood events will be reduced and people will be kept safer. These provisions help break the cycle of rebuilding to the same standard after a disaster, only for more damage to occur after the next event and the process repeating. Let's take a look at the definition of the term substantial improvement. Note that the language in your community's ordinance may vary slightly, but it should include the same general provisions. Let's focus on the first section of the definition. Any reconstruction, rehabilitation, addition, or other improvement of a structure, the cost of which equals or exceeds 50% of the market value of the structure before the start of construction of the improvement. So, simply stated, if you divide the cost of proposed improvements by the pre-improvement market value of the structure, and the resulting percentage equals or exceeds 50%, the improvements are considered a substantial improvement, and the structure must meet the same building requirements that apply for new construction in your community's ordinance. Some communities choose to adopt higher standards into their ordinance, that make the substantial improvement provision more restrictive than the minimum NFIP requirements by reducing the percentage to a value below 50%. For example, say 40%. That way, a lower cost of improvements will trigger the provision. The New Hampshire Floodplain Management Program encourages communities to consider adopting such standards to improve local resilience to flooding. You may have questions about what sorts of improvement costs apply here, or how exactly the market value of the structure must be determined. We'll go into more detail about those points later on. Let's get back to the next item in our substantial improvement definition. The term includes structures which have incurred substantial damage regardless of the actual repair work performed. So what is meant by substantial damage? We'll go over that definition separately shortly. The final part of the substantial improvement definition includes several exclusions. Here's the first one. Any project for improvement of a structure to correct existing violations of state or local health, sanitary, or safety code specifications, which have been identified by the local code enforcement official and which are the minimum necessary to assure safe living conditions. Note that these must be existing violations that were previously cited by the local code enforcement official. And the second exclusion, any alteration of a historic structure provided that the alteration will not preclude the structure's continued designation as a historic structure. Note that your community's ordinance includes a definition of the term historic structure. Buildings that are merely old, or which residents or officials simply refer to as historic, cannot be excluded from the substantial improvement requirement unless they meet this definition. Let's now take a look at the definition of the term substantial damage. Again, the actual language in your community ordinance may vary slightly. Damage of any origin sustained by a structure whereby the cost of restoring the structure would equal or exceed 50% of the market value of the structure before the damage occurred. So, if you divide the cost of the needed repairs by the pre-damage market value of the structure, and the resulting percentage equals or exceeds 50%, the structure is considered substantially damaged. If a building is determined to be substantially damaged, it is, by definition, also considered a substantial improvement. That means that the structure must meet the same building requirements that apply for new construction in your community's ordinance. As with the substantial improvement definition, communities may choose to lower the percentage in the substantial damage definition to make it more restrictive than minimum NFIP requirements. Note that the cause of damage can be from any origin, not just flooding. This could include other natural disasters, such as a fire or a tornado, or any other type of event that results in damage to a structure. It is the responsibility of local community officials to make substantial improvement and substantial damage determinations when improvements or repairs, or a combination of the two, are proposed for structures located in the special flood hazard area. In this section, we'll take a closer look at the steps involved in making these determinations. The first step in the process is to verify if a substantial improvement or damage determination must be made. If an existing structure is located in the special flood hazard area and improvements or repairs are proposed, then a determination will likely need to be made. Let's say you've reviewed a permit application for proposed improvements to a building, and you've verified that the building is located in the special flood hazard area. So you've established that a substantial improvement determination will need to be made. What should happen next? For proposed improvements, as in this example, or in cases where one or only a small number of buildings are affected by damage, the determination process can typically be incorporated into your community's regular permitting process for proposed development. A resource that may be of help at this stage is the Substantial Improvement and Substantial Damage Application Packet developed by the New Hampshire Floodplain Management Program. This packet is intended to assist community officials by providing a format that will allow the community to process such applications consistently and fairly, ensuring that applicants submit all of the necessary information for the community to make the substantial improvement or damage determination, and making it easier to document determinations for retention in the community's permanent records as is required under the NFIP. The companion Property Owner Guide to Understanding Substantial Improvement and Damage Requirements can be provided to applicants to help them understand the information that must be provided and why, and the process that is followed for making a determination. Here are a few examples of types of proposed work that could potentially result in a substantial improvement determination. Remodeling the interior of a building, either with or without modifying its external dimensions. Foundation repair, vertical additions, lateral additions, or a combination of factors, including both repair and improvement costs. Remember that repair of a building determined to be substantially damaged will also trigger the substantial improvement requirement. Keep in mind that property owners may want to break an improvement project into multiple parts and request separate permits for each phase to avoid having to comply with substantial improvement requirements or for other reasons. Some communities address this issue in their permit application and require property owners to confirm that the work described in the application is all of the work that will be done. Adopting revised language into your community's ordinance can also prevent substantial improvement requirements from being circumvented due to such phased improvements. For assistance, contact the New Hampshire Floodplain Management Program team. Examples of types of damage that could potentially result in a substantial damage determination include the following. Damage from flooding, especially events when floodwaters rise above the first floor of a building, last for an extended amount of time, or when high-velocity floodwaters are involved. Damages resulting from any other origin, including fires, high winds, a gas explosion, tornadoes, or a combination of factors. Once you've confirmed whether a substantial improvement or substantial damage determination needs to be made, you'll need to verify the cost of the improvements or repairs to the structure. Usually this is information that must be provided to you by the property owner. However, after a large-scale disaster that damages many buildings, a different approach will probably be warranted. We'll talk more about resources that can help in that situation later on. Shown here are costs that must be included in the work estimate and those that can be excluded. A more comprehensive list is available in FEMA's Substantial Improvement and Substantial Damage Desk Reference. A worksheet and checklist of costs to include is also available in the previously mentioned application packet and property owner guide. Keep in mind that if materials or labor are donated, or if the property owner is planning on doing the work themselves, the fair market cost of those items will still need to be included in the cost estimate. Repair costs of damage must be calculated for the full repair to the building's before damage condition, even if the property owner chooses to do less. Next, you will need to verify the market value of the structure. For substantial improvement determinations, that means the current pre-improvement market value of the structure. For substantial damage determinations, that means the pre-damage market value of the structure. In both cases, the market value must be only for the structure and not include the value of the land. Acceptable sources of market value vary, but a commonly used source is the assessed value of the structure as developed for community property tax assessment purposes. If the property owner disagrees with the source of market value as selected by the community, they may hire a licensed property appraiser to submit a comparable property appraisal at their own cost. The community must review the submitted appraisal and determine if it is reasonable for the specific characteristics of the building. Now that you have the cost estimate for the improvements or repairs and the market value of the structure, you have the information you need to make the determination. For substantial improvement determinations, divide the total improvement costs by the market value of the structure. For substantial damage determinations, divide the total repair costs by the market value. Once you've made the determination, you will need to communicate it to the property owner in an official letter. This determination letter is needed even if you've determined the work will not constitute a substantial improvement or substantial damage. Sample letters for different scenarios are available in FEMA's Substantial Improvement and Substantial Damage desk reference. The property owner has the right to appeal a determination on the basis of repair or improvement costs that should be included or excluded, inappropriate valuations of costs for the proposed work, or an inappropriate method to determine the market value of the building. So how can you ensure that your community's determinations are defensible? It's important that they are made consistently and fairly. Best practices for doing so include the following. Use the same methods for determining market value and improvement and repair estimates on a community-wide basis. Prepare and follow written procedures that outline your community's process for making determinations. Be sure to document decisions. Keep all pertinent records related to making and issuing determinations in your permit files. Once the community has issued the determination, the proposed development can be permitted. As mentioned previously, if proposed work is determined to be a substantial improvement or constitutes substantial damage, that means that the building must be brought into full compliance with your community's floodplain ordinance and meet the same requirements that apply for new construction. Those requirements include, but are not limited to, the following. Elevating the lowest floor of the building to or above the base flood elevation that applies in the area. Note that the New Hampshire State Building Code is actually more restrictive than this minimum NFIP standard and requires that the lowest floor be elevated at least 1 foot above the base flood elevation. Also, non-residential buildings may instead be flood-proofed or made watertight rather than elevated. Basements are not allowed. Enclosures below the lowest floor are allowed, as long as they meet the special requirements listed in the ordinance. Utility systems must be protected from floodwaters, and flood damage-resistant materials must be used. Requirements will vary depending on the flood zone the property is located in. For example, more restrictive requirements will apply in V zones, also known as the coastal high hazard area along the seacoast. Make sure you receive revised plans from the applicant that confirm the development will comply with the requirements in the community's ordinance. Once received, the permit for the improvements or repairs can be issued. For proposed work that was determined not to be a substantial improvement or substantial damage, it will not need to meet the same ordinance requirements that apply for new development. However, a permit will still need to be issued. And be sure to check the ordinance to determine if other provisions apply. For example, if the site is located in the floodway, as shown on the flood maps, there are special requirements that apply for any type of development. Finally, be sure to keep all relevant documents related to permitting of the development. Permanent retention of this documentation is a requirement for NFIP community participation. Examples of types of records that need to be preserved include the following: permit applications, including any supporting documents provided, your community's substantial improvement and substantial damage determinations, including inputs such as the market value of the building and the cost or repair estimate, and the official determination letter to the property owner. Post-construction as-built elevation data that confirms the structure was built in compliance with your community's ordinance. Any variance proceedings, including justification and the necessary notifications as listed in the ordinance, and any other documentation or certifications required in the ordinance. Additional information on each of the steps we've just reviewed and much more is available in FEMA's Substantial Improvement and Substantial Damage Desk Reference. We'll also mention other resources that can help with the determination process at the end of this training. In situations where a large-scale disaster has happened that has damaged many buildings in your community at once, a different approach will probably be necessary when it comes to making substantial damage determinations. This section of the training includes tools and information that may be of help in the aftermath of such a disaster. FEMA has developed free software called the Substantial Damage Estimator, or SDE tool, that can help community officials make substantial damage determinations after disasters. The tool can be used to assess flood, wind, wildfire, seismic, or other forms of damage, and includes assessment options for both residential structures and common types of non-residential structures. The benefit of the SDE tool is that it can help communities provide timely and consistent substantial damage determinations when many buildings are involved so that reconstruction can begin more quickly following a disaster. FEMA offers free online training about how to use the SDE tool that can be accessed at any time through its Emergency Management Institute website. After a flood disaster, up to $30,000 of funds are available to property owners with a National Flood Insurance Program insurance policy. Separate from a standard NFIP flood insurance claim, these funds are called Increased Cost of Compliance, or ICC funds, and can be used by the property owner to bring a building into compliance with the Community Floodplain Ordinance. This includes elevating, demolishing and rebuilding, relocating, or for non-residential buildings, floodproofing an existing building in the special flood hazard area. In order to qualify for ICC funds, the structure must either meet the criteria of a repetitive loss structure or be substantially damaged due to flooding. In the former case, the community must have adopted a repetitive loss provision into their ordinance. In the latter case, a copy of the community substantial damage determination is required. ICC funds can also instead be assigned to the community by the property owner to serve as a cost share match for a FEMA hazard mitigation grant project. In any case, close coordination between the property owner and community officials will likely be necessary in order to obtain ICC funds after a flood disaster. More information about ICC is available in the FEMA publication, Increased Cost of Compliance Coverage, Guidance for State and Local Officials. Following a major disaster declaration by the President, communities can apply for FEMA Public Assistance Program funds to administer and enforce building codes and their floodplain ordinance. Costs that can be reimbursed include, but are not limited to, the following: hiring and training staff to conduct related activities, reviewing and processing building permits and compliance certificates, conducting building inspections, making substantial damage determinations, and providing educational services to the public on floodplain management-related requirements. More information and a complete list of eligible activities is available in FEMA's policy memo. You can find more information about making substantial damage determinations after a large-scale disaster in the New Hampshire Flood Hazards Handbook and other resources listed on the screen. Let's review some key points we've covered during this training course. NFIP participating communities must adopt and enforce a floodplain ordinance that meets minimum NFIP requirements in order to manage development in special flood hazard areas shown on the FEMA flood maps. Included in these minimum requirements are the substantial improvement and substantial damage provisions. These provisions ensure that older buildings in the special flood hazard area are brought up to modern flood damage resistant standards when the cost of improvements or repairs equals or exceeds 50% of the market value of the structure. It is the responsibility of the community to make substantial improvement and substantial damage determinations and to ensure that all development occurring in the special flood hazard area is compliant with the community's floodplain ordinance. To learn more about the topics we've covered, visit the New Hampshire Floodplain Management Program's Substantial Improvement and Substantial Damage web pages, where you can access all of the resources mentioned during this training and more. The New Hampshire Floodplain Management Program team is also available to help. Telephone and email contact information is also on our website. This training course has been a production of the New Hampshire Floodplain Management Program. Thank you for watching.